let's talk about the integrity of the election, which is also something Congressman Lewis fought for. Jared Kushner implied that the president could move the election day. Can a sitting U.S. president move an election day?
Actually, I haven't looked into that question under the Constitution.
Well, 2 U.S. Code Section 7 says federal election day is the Tuesday after the first Monday in November. So if you take that as a correct statute, is there any executive action by a president?
I've never been asked the question before. I've never looked into it.
As Attorney General of the United States, do you believe that this 2020 presidential election will be rigged?
I have no reason to think it will be.
President Trump tweeted that the election will be rigged, but he also tweeted that when he was losing to Hillary Clinton, and he tweeted that the day after Fox showed that he was losing to Trump. But I don't want to be too political. Do you believe, as the Attorney General of the United States, that mail-in voting will lead to massive voter fraud?
I think there's a high risk that it will.
Do you ever vote by mail-in ballot?
Apparently I did once at least.
But you believe that other people voting by mail could lead to massive fraud?
No, what I've talked about, made very clear, is that I'm not talking about accommodations to people who have to be out of the state or have some particular need not to, inability to go and vote. What I'm talking about is the wholesale conversion of election to mail-in voting.
You do understand that African Americans disproportionately do not survive COVID-19 coronavirus. You are aware of that?
I didn't hear the question.
You are aware that African Americans, black people, disproportionately die from COVID-19 coronavirus, correct?
Yes, I think that's right.
And not that it would be the first time that African Americans would risk their lives to vote in this country to preserve its democracy. But the suggestion is that them having the ability to vote by mail would somehow lead to massive voter fraud. But I won't stick to that.
No, I didn't say that. I just state, I think, what is a reality, which is that if you have wholesale mail-in voting, it substantially increases the risk of fraud.
But it doesn't make it likely.
That's all I said.
So that we're crystal clear, no, the President of the United States unequivocally, unquestionably cannot move the date of the election, period. And the Attorney General of the United States knows that. So the fact that Bill Barr is equivocating here about having to look into it is all the evidence you need that this person is not operating in service of the law, but rather giving himself wiggle room to help the only person he's ever been interested in protecting, Donald Trump. Because as we've already seen, Trump has no qualms about protesting the results of the election if he thinks that the outcome will be unfavorable for him. And Bill Barr is signaling that he's wholly prepared to assist him in doing so. The simple fact is that the federal general election is set by federal statute as the Tuesday following the first Monday in November. This date cannot be changed by a state nor a president. States can set their own primary days, but the general election isn't up for debate. And look, this is an easy one. It's not a gotcha question. Asking the Attorney General whether or not the president can do something that he absolutely cannot do should have been an easy opportunity for Bill Barr to show that he has a minimum respect for the rule of law. A minimum. And yet the fact that he couldn't manage to answer this simple question by saying, no, the sitting president cannot move an election date, goes to show that he's not interested in following the law. He's only interested in giving his boss as much legal leeway as he can possibly muster because his priority is preserving Trump's power. By the way, let's assume for a moment that Trump does decide in his authoritarian sociopathy that he's going to try and cancel the election. This will not happen, but let's just humor Donald Trump and pretend for a second that it did. Here's what would happen. His and Mike Pence's term would expire on January 20th, 2021, and the presidency would then go down the line of succession. Next in line would be Speaker Pelosi, but her term, along with every other member of the House, ends on January 3rd. Next would be the Senate pro tempore, which would be the senator of the majority party with the longest record of continuous service. As it stands, that person is Republican Chuck Grassley. However, in this election in the Senate, 23 Republican seats are up versus 12 Democratic seats. So with those terms expired, the balance of the Senate would shift to the Democrats, meaning that the new Senate pro tempore would be Patrick Leahy. So in the event that Donald Trump tried to subvert federal statute and cancel the election, he would in effect hand the Oval Office over to President Leahy. But just as absurd is another point that Bill Barr made, which is this claim that voting by mail can lead to widespread fraud. First of all, as Representative Richmond laid out, Bill Barr himself voted by mail. And it's not just him. Pence and his wife, Ronna McDaniel Romney, Kayleigh McEnany, Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, Melania Trump, Betsy DeVos, Larry Kudlow, Wilbur Ross, Brad Parscale, and Trump himself have all voted by mail. And Trump's own campaign website gives directions on how to vote by mail. So it's not that they think it's unsafe, they just don't want anyone else to be able to take advantage of it. And here's why. We're in the middle of a pandemic. In rural areas that tend to vote Republican, there's not much of a line anyway to vote, so it doesn't make much of a difference. The places where lines matter in the middle of a pandemic are in more urban areas, which tend to vote Democratic. And the White House knows that if they can sow distrust or even eliminate the ability to vote by mail entirely and force everyone to vote in person, the people who will be impacted are those who don't want to wait in long lines in cities, which likely won't vote for Trump anyway. The idea that voting by mail leads to fraud is a completely baseless front for the real intent here, which is voter suppression. The simple fact is that Bill Barr is not interested in upholding the law, whether with respect to holding the federal election or not interfering in the way that states administer them. He's only interested in working on Trump's behalf to meddle in those efforts. He is without fail the most corrupt official in this administration, and when his bungled efforts to rig our own election in November fail, he'll only be remembered for enabling this president's desperate attempts to cling on to power. And don't forget to listen to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, where I'll take a deep dive into the biggest issues of the week and interview major players in the world of politics, like Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Beto O'Rourke, Eric Swalwell, Katie Porter, and many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.